West of Arkham, where the hills rise wild and the valleys are choked with a thicket of brambles and ancient gnarled oaks that seem to lean toward one another in conspiratorial silence, there lies a history that predates the horror of the blasted heath. Long before the sky vomited its chromatic blasphemy upon the farmstead of Nahum Gardner, before the fruit grew bloated and ashen, and before the very air became a medium for a nameless shimmering death, there was a period of terrestrial industry that sought to tame that ill-fated soil. It is a chronicle seldom spoken of by the few remaining inhabitants of the region, for the memories of the Miskatonic Valley are long, and the shadows that haunt the deep ravines do not take kindly to the prying light of human inquiry. The tale begins not with the meteor, but with the spade and the pickaxe, and with the stubborn ambition of Enoch Gardner, the grandfather of that wretched Nahum, whose fate remains a shuddering legend among the folk of New England. In those days the woods were not yet shunned, though they were even then regarded with a certain rustic unease. The soil was deep and loamy, yet there was a peculiar quality to the darkness of the earth, a richness that felt somehow excessive, as if the loam were saturated with the decayed remnants of things that had no place in any recognized manual of biology or geology. It was Enoch who first determined to establish the homestead in that specific sheltered fold of the hills, drawn by a magnetism he could not define, a pull that seemed to emanate from the very bedrock beneath the tangled roots of the forest. To sustain a farmstead in such a remote and rugged locale, the procurement of water was a necessity of the highest order. The springs of the upper hills were unreliable, prone to vanishing during the parched months of August, and so it was decided that a well must be sunk, a deep, stone-lined shaft that would tap into the hidden arteries of the world. For this task, Enoch employed a trio of men, hardy labourers from the outskirts of Dunwich and Arkham, men whose hands were calloused by a lifetime of toil and whose minds were supposedly fortified against the superstitions of the countryside. There was Thaddeus Peck, a man of immense physical strength; Silas Whately, a distant and less tainted cousin of the notorious family; and a quiet, observant fellow named Amasa Wright. The digging commenced in the late spring under a sky that seemed unnaturally pale and vast. At first, the work proceeded with the mundane rhythm of any such endeavour. The topsoil was stripped away, revealing a subsoil of clay and gravel that spoke of ancient glacial movements. But as the shaft descended past the 10-foot mark, the character of the excavation began to undergo a subtle and disturbing transformation. The earth, which should have become more compact and stony, instead took on a porous, almost spongy consistency. It was a dark, unwholesome hue, a shade of blackness that seemed to absorb the noonday sun rather than reflect it. Silas Whately was the first to remark upon the smell. It was not the clean, earthy scent of fresh-turned sod, but a faint, mephitic odour that hinted at stagnant pools and the anaerobic decay of primordial swamps. By the second week, the diggers had reached a depth of 20 feet, and the atmosphere within the narrow confines of the well had become oppressive. The air was heavy, laden with a moisture that felt oily against the skin. Thaddeus Peck, usually a man of jovial disposition, grew morose and irritable. He complained of a persistent ringing in his ears, a low-frequency vibration that seemed to pulse in time with his own heartbeat. Amasa Wright, the most literate of the trio, began to keep a private journal of the dig, noting that the strata they were encountering did not conform to any geological sequence he had ever heard described by the professors at Miskatonic University. They were passing through layers of a vitrified, glass-like substance that shattered into jagged, translucent shards that shimmered with a fleeting, iridescent light when struck by the labourers' lanterns. It was during the third week that the true anomaly manifested. At a depth of 35 feet, the pickaxes struck something that was neither stone nor soil. It was a surface of such profound hardness and such unnatural smoothness that it defied the efforts of the men to penetrate it. Enoch Gardner, summoned from his chores to inspect the find, peered down into the gloom of the shaft and felt a sudden, inexplicable shiver of dread. The surface at the bottom of the well was of a dull, leaden grey, yet it possessed a faint, rhythmic tremor, as if something vast and slumbering lay just beneath the crust of the earth. The labourers, driven by Enoch's relentless demand for progress, redoubled their efforts. They used heavy iron sledges and tempered steel chisels, battering away at the mysterious barrier. For hours the sound of metal on unyielding stone echoed up the shaft, a cacophony that seemed to stir the very birds from the surrounding trees. Then, with a sound like the cracking of a world, the barrier gave way. But it did not shatter into pieces. Rather, it seemed to dissolve or fold inward, revealing a void that stretched down into a darkness so absolute it felt like a physical weight. From this subterranean abyss there wafted a draught of air that was impossibly cold, a chill that suggested the interstellar reaches of the cosmos rather than the geothermal heat of the planet's interior. And with the cold came a sound, a soft, liquid slithering, as of something immense and gelatinous shifting its position in the depths. The men recoiled, their lanterns flickering and dying in the sudden gust of foul, ancient air. In the momentary darkness, Amasa Wright swore he saw a faint, pulsing glow emanating from the pit, a colour for which he had no name, a hue that existed outside the known spectrum of human vision, a sickening, vibrant, violet green that hurt the eyes and curdled the soul. Panic seized the well-diggers. They scrambled up the rope ladders, their breath coming in ragged gasps, their faces pale and distorted by a terror they could not articulate. Enoch, standing at the rim, felt the same primal urge to flee, yet he was rooted to the spot by a morbid fascination. He looked down into the well and saw, or thought he saw, the reflection of stars in the black water that began to seep upward from the void. Stars that did not belong to the constellations of the northern hemisphere, but to some alien sky whose light had travelled across aeons of emptiness to find this one lonely spot in the Massachusetts hills. The water rose with an alarming rapidity, filling the void and submerging the mysterious strata. It was a thick, turbid fluid, swirling with oily rainbows and carrying upon its surface a fine, grey ash. As it reached the 30-foot mark, the sound of the slithering ceased, replaced by a low, mournful gurgle. The men refused to return to the pit. Thaddeus Peck abandoned the farmstead that very evening, walking toward Arkham with a glazed expression and never looking back. Silas Whately retreated to his family's cabin in the hills, where he was said to have spent the remainder of his days muttering about the things that dwell beneath the stone. Only Amasa Wright remained long enough to speak with Enoch, though his words were frantic and disjointed. He spoke of the Well of the Ancients, a legend he had heard from a half-mad hermit in the Miskatonic Valley, a tale of a previous visitation, an entity or a force that had descended from the heavens in the time before man, burrowing deep into the earth to wait for the proper alignment of the spheres. This thing, Wright claimed, was not dead but dormant, and the well had inadvertently pierced the seal of its sepulchre. The water, he warned, was no longer water. It was a medium, a conduit through which the influence of the sleeper would begin to permeate the land. Enoch Gardner, a man of practical mind and stubborn pride, dismissed Wright's ravings as the product of heat and exhaustion. Yet even he could not ignore the evidence of his senses. The water in the well, though it eventually settled and became clear to the eye, possessed a taste that was utterly abhorrent, a metallic, bitter tang that left a burning sensation in the throat. The livestock, when given the water to drink, became skittish and prone to violent outbursts. The very grass around the wellhead began to grow with an unnatural vigour, its blades turning a shade of green that was too bright, too vivid, and somehow wrong. In a fit of mounting anxiety, Enoch decided to seal the well. He commanded the remaining labourers to fill the shaft with heavy stones and earth, hoping to bury the memory of what they had found. They worked through the night, dumping ton after ton of debris into the pit until the surface was level with the surrounding ground. Enoch then ordered the construction of a new well, several hundred yards to the east, on a rise of land that felt more wholesome. This second well provided water that was, for a time, untainted and sweet, and the farmstead of the Gardners began to flourish. But the law of the bad water had already taken root in the valley. The locals began to whisper about the well-diggers' folly, and mothers warned their children to stay away from the overgrown patch of land where the first well had been sunk. They said that on certain nights when the moon was thin and the wind blew from the north, one could hear a faint, rhythmic thumping coming from deep beneath the earth, a sound like a great slow heart beating in the darkness. They said that the shadows in that part of the woods did not fall as they should, and that the snow melted there first, even in the dead of winter, as if the ground itself were possessed of a fever. Years passed, and Enoch Gardner went to his grave, leaving the farm to his son, who in turn left it to Nahum. The story of the first well faded into the realm of family legend, a half-remembered anecdote told by the fireside. Yet the taint remained. The earth where the well had been sealed was never quite right. The soil there was strangely magnetic, causing compasses to spin erratically and birds to lose their way during migration. It was as if that specific point on the planet had become a beacon, a focal point for some cosmic energy that defied the laws of terrestrial physics. The well-diggers had not merely uncovered an ancient secret. They had created a rupture in the fabric of the world. They had disturbed a site that had been primed by a previous visitation. A visitation from an era so remote that the continents had not yet taken their current forms. Whatever had been buried there, whatever thing the pickaxes had struck, it acted as a lure, a gravitational anchor for the horrors that dwell in the spaces between the stars. It was this magnetism, this eldritch resonance, that eventually drew the great meteor of 1882 from the depths of the void. The meteorite did not fall by chance. It was summoned, pulled across the light years by the siren call of its buried predecessor. When the sky finally split asunder and the glowing multi-hued mass plummeted into the gardener's yard, it struck with uncanny precision. It landed not far from the site of the second well, but its influence immediately sought out the old, sealed shaft. The colour that emerged from the stone was not a new arrival to our world, but a reinforcement, a cosmic kin to the entity that had been slumbering beneath the soil since the dawn of time. The two forces merged, creating a vortex of unnameable energy that would eventually consume the gardeners, their farm, and the very sanity of the region. The tragedy of Nahum Gardner was thus predestined, a play written in the stars and rehearsed in the depths of the earth long before he was born. The well-diggers, in their innocent quest for water, had opened a door that could never be closed. They had tapped into a reservoir of cosmic malice that had been waiting for an outlet, a way to bleed its alien essence into the world of men. The bad water was merely the first symptom of a sickness that would eventually turn the Miskatonic Valley into a place of nightmare, a place where the trees dance in the absence of wind, and where the light that shines in the darkness is a colour that no human eye was ever meant to behold. Even now, as the blasted heath remains a shunned and desolate waste, the legacy of the well-diggers persists. The ruins of the Gardner house are gone, reclaimed by the encroaching forest, but the site of the original well is still marked by a peculiar depression in the ground, a hollow where nothing will grow and where the air feels thin and cold. Those who have dared to venture there speak of a sense of being watched, not by eyes, but by a presence that permeates the very atmosphere. They speak of a faint phosphorescent glow that flickers beneath the surface of the puddles after a rain, and of a sound, a soft, liquid slithering, that rises from the depths of the earth whenever the stars are right. The chronicle of the well-diggers serves as a grim reminder of the fragility of our perceived reality. We dwell on a placid island of ignorance in the midst of black seas of infinity, and it was not meant that we should voyage far. But sometimes, in our arrogance and our need, we dig too deep. We pierce the protective layers of the earth and stumble upon things that were meant to remain hidden. We uncover the bad water and think we can simply seal it away with stone and soil. But the universe is a vast and hungry place, and the things that dwell in the darkness do not forget. They wait, they pulse, and they call to their kin among the stars until the sky itself opens up to claim what was always theirs. The Miskatonic Valley keeps its secrets well, but the story of Enoch Gardner and his ill-fated labourers remains a whispered warning to all who would seek to tame the wild places of the earth. For beneath the loam and the clay, beneath the granite and the shale, there lie strata of a different kind, strata of memory and of malice, of alien gods and prehistoric visitations. And sometimes, when the spade strikes the stone, it is not water that we find, but the beginning of the end. The colour out of space was but the final act of a drama that began with a single blasphemous well, a well that sought to bring life to a farmstead, but instead brought the cold, shimmering death of the cosmos to a world that was never truly ours. In the archives of Miskatonic University, there exists a fragmented manuscript, purportedly the journal of a Meteorite, though its authenticity is often debated by the faculty. The handwriting is shaky, the ink faded to a ghostly grey, yet the words carry a weight of conviction that is difficult to dismiss. In the final entries, written in the weeks following his departure from the Gardner farm, Wright speaks of dreams that haunted his sleep, dreams of a vast pulsating city of basalt and iridescent light, buried miles beneath the Massachusetts hills. He speaks of the great ones who travelled on beams of light and who seeded the young earth with their essence, creating wells of power that would act as beacons for their eventual return. We thought we were digging for water. Wright's final scribbled line reads, "But we were digging for our own destruction. The earth is not a solid thing, but a shell, and we have cracked the shell. God help us when the hatchlings emerge." These words, written by a man who had seen too much, echo through the decades, a chilling coda to the tragedy of the blasted heath. They remind us that the horrors we face are often of our own making, born of our curiosity and our refusal to recognize the boundaries of our domain. The bad water of the Gardners was not a geological fluke, but a symptom of a deeper, more fundamental wrongness. A wrongness that still lingers in the shadows of the hills, waiting for the next fool with a spade to disturb its ancient unholy rest. And so the legend persists, a dark thread woven into the tapestry of New England's history. The well-diggers are gone, their names forgotten by all but a few, yet the work they did remains. The hole they bored into the heart of the world is still there, beneath the grey ash and the twisted thorns, a silent conduit for the nameless forces of the abyss. And as the sun sets over the Miskatonic Valley, casting long, distorted shadows across the landscape, one cannot help but wonder what other secrets lie buried beneath our feet, waiting for the sound of a pickaxe to wake them from their aeon-long slumber. The stars are vast, and the earth is old, and in the darkness between them there are things that do not sleep. They only wait for the well to be dug, for the seal to be broken, and for the colour to return once more to the world of men. The geological strata of the region, as noted by later surveyors who braved the outskirts of the blasted heath, show a disturbing lack of uniformity. There are pockets of impossible minerals, substances that exhibit properties of both organic and inorganic matter, and which seem to vibrate at a frequency that induces nausea in the observer. These anomalies are most concentrated around the site of Enoch's first well, suggesting that the previous visitation mentioned in the folklore was not a single event, but a prolonged occupation by an entity or entities whose very presence warped the local laws of physics. One particularly disturbing report, filed by a young geologist from Arkham in the early 1900s, describes a vitrified chimney of stone extending deep into the earth, a structure that appeared to have been formed by intense heat, yet which felt unnaturally cold to the touch. This chimney aligned perfectly with the location of the original well, and the geologist noted that the surrounding soil appeared to have been drained of its vitality, leaving behind a fine grey powder that bore a striking resemblance to the ash of the blasted heath. His report was suppressed by the university authorities, cited as unscientific and prone to imaginative exaggeration. Yet it remains in the restricted vaults, a silent testament to the reality of the Gardner's nightmare. The folklore of the bad water also took on a more sinister character in the years following the meteor's fall. It was said that the water from the second well, which the Gardners had used for so long, had slowly been replaced by the essence of the first, as if the subterranean void had gradually reclaimed its territory. The mutations of the Gardner family, the physical decay, the mental dissolution, and the final horrific burning from within were seen by the locals as the inevitable result of consuming this primordial broth. The colour was not just an external force. It was something they had taken into themselves, drop by drop, from the very beginning. This realization adds a layer of tragic irony to the tale. Enoch Gardner, in his attempt to provide for his family, had unwittingly poisoned them with the very substance he sought to harness. His ambition, his drive to improve the land, was the catalyst for its ultimate destruction. The well, a symbol of life and sustenance, became a fountain of death and alien corruption. It is a theme that recurs throughout the history of the Miskatonic Valley, the idea that our efforts to master nature only serve to reveal our profound insignificance in the face of the cosmic unknown. As one walks the shunned house ruins or gazes upon the grey desolation of the heath, the mind cannot help but dwell on the image of those three men, Thaddeus, Silas, and Amasa, standing at the bottom of that dark shaft, their lanterns flickering against the cold, alien void. What did they truly see in those final moments before the water rose? Was it merely a physical abyss, or was it a glimpse into the true nature of the universe? A universe that is not built for man, but for things that are older, colder, and infinitely more powerful. The silence of the hills offers no answer, but the wind that moans through the twisted oaks seems to carry a faint, rhythmic pulsing, a heartbeat from the deep. It is the sound of the well-digger's folly, a sound that will continue to echo as long as the earth remains, a reminder that some things are better left buried, and that some wells should never be dug. For in the darkness beneath the soil, there are truths that can shatter the mind, and colours that can consume the soul. And in the end, we're all just diggers in the dark, searching for water in a desert of cosmic indifference, unaware that the thing we are truly uncovering is the very shadow of our own annihilation. The final fate of the well-diggers themselves is a matter of dark speculation. Thaddeus Peck, it is rumoured, ended his days in an asylum in Brattleboro, where he spent his hours digging frantic shallow holes in the earthen floor of his cell, claiming he was looking for the sky. Silas Whately vanished entirely, his cabin found empty and smelling of stagnant water, with strange iridescent slime trails leading toward the deep ravines. And Amasa Wright, the chronicler of the dig, was last seen boarding a ship in Boston, bound for the remote islands of the Pacific, where he hoped to find a land that had never known the touch of the stars. Their legacy, however, remains in the soil of the Gardner farm. The bad water law continues to haunt the region, a warning to any who would attempt to resettle the area. The Miskatonic Valley has reclaimed the blasted heath, but it is a reclamation of shadows and silence. Nothing truly grows there, and the animals that wander into the area are never seen again. The wellhead, though buried and forgotten, remains a point of entry, a scar on the face of the world that will never fully heal. In the end, the story of the well-diggers is a story of the prehistory of horror. It is the foundation upon which the tragedy of the colour out of space was built. It teaches us that the cosmic is not something that only comes from above. It is something that is already here beneath our feet, waiting for us to give it a way out. The meteorite was merely the key that turned the lock, but the door had been fashioned long ago by human hands and iron tools in the dark, spongy earth of a forgotten farmstead west of Arkham. And as the night falls over the valley and the stars begin to peer through the canopy of the ancient oaks, one can almost see it. The faint, shimmering, violet-green light rising from the ground, the ghost of a colour that should not be, the lingering breath of the thing that dwells in the well. It is a light that does not illuminate, but obscures, a light that speaks of aeons past and aeons yet to come. It is the light of the well-digger's folly, and it will shine on in the darkness of the earth and the silence of the hills, until the world itself is consumed by the hunger of the stars. The people of Arkham are fond of saying that the past is a foreign country, but in the Miskatonic Valley the past is a living, breathing presence. It is in the water we drink, the soil we till, and the dreams that haunt our sleep. The Gardners are gone, and their farm is a wasteland. But the bad water remains, a hidden current of malice that flows beneath the surface of our lives. We are all well diggers in our own way, reaching into the unknown for the things we need to survive, never realizing that the deeper we go, the closer we come to the things that would destroy us. The well is sealed, the heath is blasted, and the colour has returned to the void. But the magnetism remains. The beacon is still lit. And somewhere in the vast cold reaches of space, something is watching, waiting for the next sound of a pickaxe striking stone, for the next crack in the shell of the world. For the well-diggers were not the first to find the secret of the Massachusetts hills, and they will certainly not be the last. The earth is old, and its memory is long, and the horrors it hides are as eternal as the stars themselves. So let the woods remain shunned, and let the hills keep their silence. Let the story of Enoch Gardner and his men be a lesson to us all. For there are depths that should not be plumbed, and voids that should not be opened. And in the dark, mephitic air of the deep places of the earth, there are things that are better left undisturbed, things that have no name, no form, and no mercy. The well-diggers found their water, but they also found the end of the world. And in the cold, liquid gurgle of the bad water, we can still hear the echoes of their terror, a warning from a time before the stars fell, and a reminder of the darkness that waits for us all. The final irony of the well-diggers' labour lies in the very nature of the water they sought. In their human understanding, water was the essence of life, the fundamental necessity for the growth of their crops and the survival of their kin. They delved into the earth with the hope of nourishment, never suspecting that the fluid they would eventually liberate was not the lifeblood of the planet, but a corrosive alien ichor, a substance that did not sustain life, but consumed and transmuted it into something unrecognizable. The bad water was a mockery of life, a liquid blasphemy that transformed the gardener's pastoral dream into a charnel house of spectral horrors. This transformation began slowly, almost imperceptibly, as the tainted moisture seeped through the surrounding soil. The roots of the ancient oaks were the first to feel its touch, their leaves turning a sickly, translucent hue even before the meteor's arrival. The insects that crawled in the dark loam began to exhibit strange, chitinous deformities, and the very worms that aerated the earth became bloated and sluggish, their bodies shimmering with a faint internal luminescence. The well-diggers had not just opened a hole, they had introduced a pathogen into the local ecosystem, a cosmic infection that would eventually reach its terminal stage with the falling of the star. As the years progressed toward that fateful night in 1882, the taint spread in concentric circles from the sealed well. It was a slow-motion catastrophe, a creeping rot that claimed the land inch by inch. The Gardners, living in the center of this burgeoning nightmare, were like sailors on a sinking ship, unaware that the hull had been breached long before they set sail. Their reliance on the second well was a temporary reprieve, for the two shafts were connected by the hidden, porous channels of the underlying strata. The bad water was patient. It moved through the dark veins of the earth with the inexorable pressure of the abyss, until it finally found its way into the buckets and the troughs of the homestead. The law of the well-diggers thus serves as the essential prologue to The Colour Out of Space. It explains the why of the tragedy, why the meteor chose that specific spot, and why the horror was so absolute. The ground was already prepared. The stage was already set. The colour did not have to fight to establish its foothold. It merely had to occupy the space that had been cleared for it by the pickaxes of Enoch's men. It was a homecoming of sorts, a return to a site that had been marked by its predecessors eons ago. It is a tale of how our most basic needs, water, land, survival, can be used against us by forces we cannot comprehend. The well-diggers were not villains, they were merely men doing the work of men. But in the Miskatonic Valley, the work of men is often the undoing of man. The well they dug remains a symbol of that undoing. A dark, stone-lined eye peering into the soul of the cosmos, and reflecting back a light that is neither of this world nor for it. The silence that now hangs over the blasted heath is the silence of the grave, but it is also the silence of a completed work. The colour has done its task, the gardeners are gone, and the well is finally, truly sealed. Not by stones and earth, but by the utter desolation of the land. Yet, for those who know the history, the air still feels heavy with the weight of what lies beneath. The bad water still flows in the deep, secret places, and the magnetism of the site still pulls at the edges of our reality. The well-diggers may be forgotten, but the void they uncovered is eternal. And in the dark reaches of the Massachusetts hills, the memory of their folly remains, a shivering legend of the time before the sky fell, and a warning that some depths are better left unplumbed, and some secrets better left in the dark.